Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cut to the Chase Sports Podcast, where we bring unique insight and analysis behind your favorite teams. I'm your host, Chase Shantz. Got our special guest on the show today, Charlie Walter of CBS San Francisco, joins the podcast. Loving the Bengals gear, Charlie. How you doing?
Thanks, man. Doing well. Hoping that as a Cincinnati fan, none of my teams have ever really been in contention consistently. It's always been a real short window, if there's been a window at all. But as of right now, man, it feels like the world is their oyster. I don't know what that means, but I've heard people say that phrase before, so I'm going to steal it.
Most definitely. It's what a time to be alive for a Cincinnati fan, Bengals fan, and all that. Just hoping that we see some better days ahead. But man, they're pretty good as they are right now. But
No doubt
man,
about it.
let's get a background on you right here, Cincinnati kid. Just tell us about yourself, Charlie.
Yeah, so where do you want to start? I could start with the fact that I'm a 5'10" lefty with a mid jump shot that never played basketball past freshman year, but have always loved basketball, and that's what got me into broadcasting back at Moeller High School in Cincinnati. Started calling the basketball teams there after my junior year. So I was a student manager my junior year and did the stats and ran the analytics and acted like I was going to be a coach someday, when in reality we were just messing around and forgetting the bag of balls half the time, so we couldn't practice. But with that being said, my senior year they decided to give me the responsibility of being the voice of the team, which I've always wanted to do. It's cliche, but I think anyone that wants to go far in this business at some point in life has been that person that was outside calling themselves or announcing a video game or whatever it may be, and then they said, hey, this is kind of fun, and looked more into it. So that was my opportunity. It came as 100% dumb luck, but had a bunch of people that I respected, including the coaches, say that I did a good job, and there was potential for me to have a career in that, and if I would want to do that. So Ohio University was the best school around me and the best school that my ACT scores had let me get into. State school. So stayed in town. Bobcats, or I guess not in town, but right up the road to Athens, about 2.5 hours from Cincinnati. Went to OU. Didn't actually call any games there, and really haven't called any games in my life for money outside of a brief stint in AA baseball. And if you know anything about the minor leagues, you're not making much. So went there, started working for the student-run TV station. Not necessarily out of choice. I think in a perfect world, I would have been calling all the games at the radio station, but the talent was saturated. It was very senior laden. I couldn't really get a foot in the door as much as I tried. So the TV station was what offered opportunities, and I figured out how to be a sports anchor. I figured out how to run highlights. I figured out how to put packages together and the whole shebang. And then I gave it a go in the professional world. And honestly, I didn't think it would last this long in my first stint because I was pretty bad at my job, but I always had a passion for it. And being around the right people allowed me to soak in the knowledge from them and get better. And here I am. But who is Charlie Walter in a simplistic term? I like to chill.
There you go. That's a nice summary right there over, nice 3 minutes span right there. I like it. I like it a lot. Kind of pulled the reverse Joe Burrow from Cincinnati to Athens. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
And Joe Burrow, funny enough, he was one of the first athletes I covered. So my junior
Oh, really?
year, there was a show called Gridiron Glory. And if you have any Southeastern Ohio fans listening, they'll know all about it, potentially. It was on the PBS in Athens, all student run. So you had the hiccups of a bunch of idiots that were focused on going out to the post show party at midnight after this thing aired at 11:30. And we ran the show. And my junior year, they said, would you like to cover the TVC Hawking or the TVC Ohio? And I said TVC Hawking because this team Trimble was fun the previous year. When in the TVC Ohio was one Joe Burrow, quarterback of Athens High School. So basically, it was like a sports center for high school. And I never got to call his highlights, but I was always in the room when he, came in for the award show and that sort of thing. So I've been aware of Joe Burrow before almost anyone else in the world.
Man, that's awesome though, man. Coming from the plains in Ohio, Athens, Ohio. Man, it seems like a real dope area, nice party school and everything at Ohio.
Yeah, Ohio was a great time, and Joe Burrow has always been a super humble kid, and you never really knew watching him play if it was just the competition was so bad, because it was, or if he was that good. He was throwing for 56 touchdowns and
Yeah.
5,000 yards and just eye-popping numbers. And you assumed when he went to Ohio State that, all right, he was a good high school player, but he's probably not going to get his chance here. He goes to LSU and had a decent year, which I figured he was, and then he popped off, and I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this dude is for real, like one of the all-time greats we're talking about. It kind of
Mhm.
came out of nowhere, but much respect to him. He's worked his tail off.
Most definitely threw those numbers in high school, but he even threw those numbers in college, 5,600 yards and 60 touchdowns in his final year of college. It's
Yeah,
unbelievable how it
Jefferson
happened.
and Chase and Moss, that may go down when we look back at it, and a decade is one of the best teams of all time.
Man, most definitely. And we gotta love Burrow, Chase, or still in the NFL, still with in Cincinnati and all. It's been a great time for Cincinnati, and for the Cincinnati kid Charlie himself. So, obviously you went to Ohio. You got a chance to actually, work in cover some SEC teams actually. Auburn, Bama, Tennessee, Kentucky. How crazy is the SEC country about their sports, especially, football and basketball?
It's wild because I'm in San Francisco right now, the Bay Area, and they do not care about their collegiate athletics. And granted, Stanford and Cal have not given them a reason to care in football or basketball for that matter either. But
Mhm.
it's just a different animal. I mean, SEC, it's church, it's country music, it's SEC football, and it's family, and then maybe throw in some cigars or something like that. I don't know what else they're doing in the South. I was a transplant, but I mean, it's religion down there. It truly is. I covered Alabama and Auburn out of the gate and didn't enjoy it as much as I probably should have, just because I was learning the nooks and crannies of the industry and wasn't very good at my job. And with that being said, I had to spend a lot of time figuring out how to do the job instead of just sitting back and enjoying it like I can do now with the 49ers. But that was my first stint, couple of years in the industry. Thought that maybe I wasn't going to do the whole studio side of things and wasn't going to do an anchor reporter, and got back into play by play, since I told you that was my first love, and did that for Double A baseball. Really enjoyed it in Knoxville for the Tennessee Smokies, the Double A affiliate of the Cubs. But it was just hard to get a year-round gig, spring training. Minor league baseball just didn't pay much. And then if you're supplementing that, that's 4 months out of the year. And most of those jobs aren't full time. And if they are, you're doing sales at that station too, which I didn't want to do. I didn't want to pigeonhole myself to only baseball. So I looked into women's basketball and that didn't work out. So boom, I'm down in SEC country in Knoxville. And once the baseball season ends, they say, hey, we've seen that you've done some work with a camera before. How about you be an MMJ? You shoot the Tennessee games, and maybe if you work your way up to it, we'll put you on air. And I worked my way up to it in like an hour. I did a run through, and they're like, "All right, you
Like
can
that.
go on air." Yeah, so I did some packages and never got to anchor there. I apparently couldn't anchor, but I could go do a live shot at a football game, which
What?
didn't make much sense with
Not a whole lot.
considering with the anchor you got the safety net of a prompter at least. But I did that for a few months. That led to the Lexington gig, and I mean, it was crazy, man. Tennessee had one of the most faithful fan bases I've ever seen. I was down there for Butch Jones last year. They didn't win a single SEC game. They were horrible. There was drama every single day. Players getting kicked off the team. Rumors that everyone couldn't stand Butch. He gets fired, late in the season, and there was still 100,000 people singing Rocky Top every
Yep.
weekend. Like, it was nuts. Kentucky's the same way for basketball. Just Rupp Arena's packed every single day. They're 17-7 and complaining that about to be like a 6 seed and complaining that Calipari's lost it and he can't coach anymore. So those two I remember very vividly and enjoyed a lot. Just going back to the Alabama, I know I covered them and it was cool, but looking back on it more and more, I covered a lot of Troy. Since I was the number 3 in the sports department, I didn't get to cover Alabama and Auburn as much as I liked. I got out there a couple times, but yeah, again, I was more focused on just figuring out how to do this job.
Man, most definitely. That's dope though, man. Being able to get yourself in those opportunities and, take advantage of those, Tennessee and Kentucky, of course. I mean, and that's the thing. We'll talk about Kentucky and stuff like that. 17-7, that's higher level problems. Oh, we're going to get a 6 seed in the tournament. This is the end of the world and all that. Like, just getting in the dance is great,
So I got there. My first year was Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Kevin
Mm.
Knox, Hamidou Diallo, PJ Washington, and they had underperformed all year. They lost like 5 straight games. The first time in the Calipari era, there was no consistency, but they proved, time and time again that they could play with some pretty decent teams. And they went to the tournament that year and lost in the Sweet 16 to Kansas State. But of course, ran through the SEC tournament and beat Grant Williams and that Tennessee team that I had covered just a few months earlier before I got the Tennessee job. And then the next year, I think they added Tyler Hero to the mix. Then after that, it was Tyrese Maxey. I mean, it was a big time program to cover. I'm turning on ESPN and pretty much a player that I was doing one-on-one interviews with is on, Sports Center now. It seems like every single night. And they were just so young. It was such a different vibe than doing like the 49ers right now, because they're not media trained and they're just, they're kids, they're superstars, but they're 18, 19 years old.
Exactly. Like those kids are 18, 19 years old getting drafted. Let's talk about some teams that, like, especially in the NBA, they're drafting kids, man. It's not like the NFL where they're drafting, guys that you said they've been trained to talk about this stuff. Drafting kids, that's a big thing right there. But that's so awesome to, be able to have that experience and cover some of those guys. But I'll relay this. All right. Being a Cincinnati kid, describe the surreal feeling it was to work TV for the Reds at Bally Sports.
Yeah, so let's start off with how I got the job, and it was just networking through the years. Like, I was an intern there. I scratch that. They didn't have an internship. I was the intern's intern my freshman year of summer in college. Yeah, so I was a volunteer intern basically. My mom knew someone that worked higher up there and said, "Hey, my son wants to work here someday. Can he do anything?" So I basically would like follow around the mascot and work for like the Reds kids club, the Reds heads or whatever, and hand out brochures, and would just basically walk around with people all day. And I don't know if that ever, led to anything. It may have just been the fact that I was a broadcaster that was local that was able to do the job. But I like to throw that story into the mix to show, how much I love the Reds and how long it dates back. But I originally interviewed for like the sideline job, and female Shannon Ford got it and did it for a couple of years, I believe, while I was in Lexington. And so I didn't get that gig. And then when she moved on, they offered me kind of a test run, basically, not that gig exactly, but said, "Hey, why don't you go around the minors, and for Reds Live, you could put together some feature stories. You can, we'll hire your photographer from LAX 18 as a freelance guy, and you guys can just run around to Louisville, Dayton, Chattanooga, shoot some stories, and feature certain guys." We did Taylor Trammell, we did Tyler Stevenson, Mike Ciani, did a few stories on Dayton, Aristides Aquino. So we just featured some of those guys throughout the year, and only went in studio twice, once at the ballpark, once at our downtown studio. And was so nervous for that. It was just them asking me questions and just having to know information and not have to carry a show. Literally just like you asking me here, just a subject and just giving my knowledge, but was so nervous because it was the hometown team. And I knew that when I looked at my phone afterwards, I'd have 7 of my friends like, "Are you working for the Reds?" Whereas you didn't get that in Montgomery, Alabama or Lexington, Kentucky. I didn't know anyone that was watching me. So it was different in that regard. And I remember the first time they called me and said, "Hey, how would you like to host 30 Reds Live shows next year?" And I'm like, "You mean with like Sam and Welsh and Cal?" And they're like, "Yeah." Yeah. And you can imagine the surreal feeling it was like, just it was 2020. It was right before COVID actually. And COVID almost put a huge damper in my plans. And it did, because it cut me from 40 to like a prorated session of 8 games before I had the full slate the next year. But so where was I going with the my ADD brain kicks in sometimes. I mean, looking at the banner on the screen right now, being a Cincinnati kid, described the surreal feeling it was. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Just 2 years prior to that pandemic, I was down in Alabama and left TV for a minute because like I wasn't good at my job, to be honest with you. And I was always decent on camera, but the other portions of it I wasn't really good at, and figured it out in Lexington, was kind of ready for the moment at that point, having picked a couple people's brains in Knoxville and Montgomery and now Lexington. And I felt good about where I was at, but still it's like, that's pre and post for a big league team. You got a bunch of people watching potentially. The team was good. It was the team that lost to the Braves in the playoffs, followed by the next year's team that broke records to start the year and was competitive until the Cardinals made that push late. Yep. And it was amazing, man. It was one of the cool things in my life that when I moved to San Francisco to be with my wife, there wasn't any chance to do it long term. But that first year, when they said, "Hey, I know you live in San Francisco, but we're going to offer you this package of like 40 games. Can you make it work?" Any sane human being would have said, "Nah, I have a job at CBS. I'm trying to work my way in out here. I cover, to be frank with you, bigger teams in the terms of the 49ers and the Warriors." Now, granted, it's not the flagship station. It's just CBS, but still, it didn't make sense to fly all the way across the country and do these games, but it was my team. And the year before, it was only 8 games. I was just getting my feet wet. I wasn't fully comfortable. I was like, I have to do this. So I flew back, 7, 8 times, and there were no direct flights from San Francisco. Apparently COVID ended that. So sometimes it was, 12-hour days in the airport, and
wow,
a lot of podcasts and a lot of, literally sleepless nights rolling into those Reds games for the opener of like a 6-game homestand. But it was well worth it. I had a blast and love the Reds.
Man, that's one of those things where it's just like, you get that opportunity presented to you and you're like, well, why not be different? Why not go back home and call the team of my home and all that? That's awesome stuff to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had my family there, so I could stay with them. And I wasn't staying in a hotel room or anything like that. And it was the year right around, it was the half year, the COVID half year, where it affected half the season. And the other half was, 75% attendance, or maybe they went to full attendance that year, but you know what I'm talking about, where it was like 25% attendance to start the year. Yep. And yeah, it was a great time for sure to get back there. And because of that COVID half year, flights were cheap. You remember how it was during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Like flights went down big time, and that was one of the reasons I could do it. It wasn't $700 to get back home. It was like $150, and it was like, all right, I'm going to net a good amount of money. Like, why wouldn't I do this? But by the end of the year, it was definitely really taxing and something, that wasn't long-term sustainable at the current moment. But I'm really glad that I did it for that one season. And honestly, I got out at the right time, it appears. Last year would have been brutal. I watched Annie, who took over, and she called quite a bit of losses. So they weren't nearly as fun. It wasn't nearly as fun trying to get Sam to perk up after a loss.
Yeah, I mean, probably good timing right there. But hopefully the Reds can get it back up overall. But we'll see what happens with that. But obviously, in San Francisco right now, I want to ask you about the West Coast lifestyle. What's it like being in the Pacific time zone in the Bay Area?
Pacific time zone's crazy, man. Like I'll wake up sometimes. I use the Action app, and I'll, play some bets or some hypothetical bets, I guess, and just kind of look down the slate of college basketball and college football games. And then I'll wake up the next morning, the game will be like over. It's just like, what time did this game start? They start at 9 a.m., these noon tips. So that took a while to get used to. The weather out here, the first year I was out here, was insane. It was so nice. It was like 65 every day, winter, summer, didn't matter. Sometimes it get a little foggy where I live down in the peninsula, but in the city it was 65 and sunny like every day. And that was the first couple of years, but this year's been a little different. We've broken some record for rainfall. It snowed for the first time around the Bay Area for the first time in like 40 years, and just a lot of rain. and it's been like 50 and rainy consistently, which isn't terrible. You throw on a rain jacket and some pants and you're fine.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been as much exploring as there was the first year. And quite frankly, I'm a lot busier. When I moved out here, I didn't have a gig. I just kind of took a leap of faith. I was working at Dick's selling shoes for a minute. I was personal training. It was, telling people to do their all out sprints at Orange Theory to make a little bit of money. And I was doing that for, 6-8 months to where I had so much downtime. And this industry, one good and bad thing about it is, the good thing is you sleep in every day, you have your mornings, you have your afternoons. The bad news is, even if you get that dinner break, you're typically, in work clothes from give or take 4 to midnight. So a lot of times, you just can't really get out as much as you'd like to, and you're working on weekends. But the West Coast lifestyle, it's different, man. I've been out here long enough to the point where I don't notice the differences anymore. But when I first got out here, people aren't as friendly, I'd say. And granted, it was COVID, so people would be walking outside with masks on and wouldn't be trying to strike up conversations when you're walking your dogs. But it's maybe it's not even friendly is the right word. It's just people aren't as conversational to strangers. People kind of mind their own business. Whereas I remember when you're living in the South and you walk by someone like, hey, people just kind of say hi, and you don't really do that here. You just kind of do your own thing.
Yep. It's obviously different lifestyle, different region of the country. So people are going to function a little differently, and just, obviously got to adapt to it. I'll tell you this, you had to adapt from the Bengals to the Niners, man. What should the Niners' plan of attack be this offseason? Obviously had a great season, 13-4, ton of star power on that team. Quarterbacks, man. I mean, a lot of different quarterbacks play, but the Niners just still won. What's going to happen in the offseason? What should happen in the offseason for these guys?
It's fascinating because it seemed like a simple scenario going into the NFC Championship where Brock Purdy has won the starting job, and Trey Lance is going to be around in case Brock Purdy is a flash in the pan. And they're both young enough, and they're both on rookie deals, and they're cheap, and there's no issue in letting that scenario ride. Now, a little setback for Purdy, injures the elbow. Surgery appears to be, decently serious to where he may miss the start of the season and all of camp. And now everyone's panicking. It's just like, well, we can't wait until week 2 to figure it out. There's rumors that, and they're always going to surface because Tom Brady is from the peninsula in the Bay Area. And there's always rumors that Tom's going to come back and finish off his career here. Aaron Rodgers is from here. Now, there's not many rumors about Rodgers coming back here for whatever reason, but I've heard maybe they bring in Matt Ryan. Phillip Rivers was a name that got tossed around the other day. I don't know why. It feels like he's been retired for at least a couple of years.
Yeah.
Andy Dalton is a name that's got thrown out there, although I don't think Dalton would want to come in to be a number 3 when he has an option to go somewhere and be a 2 or maybe even a 1 for a really bad team.
Oh, yeah.
I think Brock Purdy played well enough to where if he was drafted number 2, if he was drafted or 3 where Trey Lance was a couple of years ago, I think people would say, absolutely, Brock Purdy's the guy. He's got the measurables. He went 3 in the draft, like roll with him. But because of where he was picked, I think there is a little implicit bias where you sit there and say, well, let's just hold on. 49ers dealt with this a decade ago or close to it when Kaepernick was playing QB, had the one really, really good year. And yes, he was a starting quarterback for the time being, but by year 3, by year 4, he just had fallen off a little bit, like a lot of quarterbacks do. And the Niners have to be careful on what do they want for the long term as compared to the short term. I think short term, you proved last year you have a good enough team to run it back with Purdy/Lance and then maybe grab a veteran, just to replace Josh Johnson if all hell does break loose. But you have to look into the 3-4 years down the road. Is Purdy, is Lance that quarterback that is going to be the guy? And granted, Tom Brady's not going to be the guy. Phillip Rivers sure as hell isn't going to be the guy. But I think you can only take it 1 year at a time. You can't look 4 or 5 years down the road. And as of right now, you got 2 quarterbacks on the rookie deals. One of them has played really well, and the other, quite frankly, hasn't played much. So I'm just looking at from the logical standpoint where Purdy's your guy. If Lance has to overtake him for a bit to start the year, that's exactly what they did last year. They had to, they didn't have to. They chose to start Lance over Jimmy Garoppolo to begin the year, and Lance was your guy, and there wasn't that much complaining. It was backing him. But now that we've seen Purdy, it's what can Trey do for us? And it's pretty nuanced. It's interesting. It's interesting to see where they're going to go. I don't think Brady is going to happen. I think it's likely just going to be a veteran backup, and everyone's going to have to get behind Trey Lance, like it or not.
Yep, most definitely. I mean, the Niners have such a well-constructed team. They just, obviously with Purdy, I think it was kind of weird because I think with like Purdy, like you said, with his draft pick being, Mr. Irrelevant and all that stuff with, I think people were more waiting for him to just have some type of downfall because he's a 7th round pick. And it was like, it was a really weird scenario playing that many quarterbacks, but still being that good. You've never seen it before in this league.
Yeah, he was the best of the three. He was better than Jimmy Garoppolo. He was better than Trey Lance, and he was better than both of them by a long shot. Like, he was really good. And that Seahawks game, he set some NFL records for how good he was in the playoffs as a rookie. And not even as a rookie. I think it was, it was just a first time starting a playoff. A quarterback in his first game ever as a playoff starting quarterback had, like the most total touchdowns. I think he had 4. So he could play, proved it time and time again. Always just in the back of your mind, he's not that tall. He doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. Some people want to say, oh, he's underlooked. He's the next Tom Brady. He's not Tom Brady. Tom Brady's a lot bigger than Brock Purdy. When that pocket collapses, if the line's not as good next year as it was this year, does he have any issues? Is there that sophomore slump? There's always just questions. But I think in life, if someone proves that they can do something, you got to keep giving them that opportunity to prove it. And when he's healthy, unless Trey Lance is killing it, and then you ride the hot hand, you would think that Brock Purdy's going to get that opportunity to prove that going 8-0 to start his career and looking really good and beating solid teams and having command of the offense and having George Kittle say that he's a superstar and, he's playing like Superman, according to Mike McGlinchey and all these things, and has the team behind him. Like, you got to roll with him. Whether he's the long-term solution or not, you take that 1 year at a time and you see if he can prove it.
Most definitely. It's going to be a very interesting offseason for the Niners and, coming up for 2023. But I'll tell you this, the Warriors, favorite moments working Warriors games and all that's what I'm going to ask you. But I got to say, I'm a big Warriors fan. I came on before the bandwagoning, all the 2014 when they won the championship and all. And people were like, oh, you're a bandwagon and all that stuff. Like, nah, it was a little bit before then. I had to just preface that right there. But let me ask you, what were some of your favorite moments working or talking about the Warriors?
It had to be the NBA Finals last year. And granted, during the regular season, the cool thing about about local TV is you cover all the sports. So you go football heavy during football season, because obviously we get the Raiders games on CBS and they used to be in Oakland. And then we get some Niners games too. So football's your bread and butter during that time of the season. Then you have a lot of March Madness, obviously, and college basketball. We have those games on CBS, so that gets big. Then you have the Masters and golf tournaments where we do those post-round shows. And then it's baseball opening day, and you don't really think about the Warriors. I mean, you show their highlights every single game, but you're not really going to the games and being a live presence. You're more so just watching them. And then when May rolls around, first round, second round, you're at every single game. You're traveling with them. And I got to go to games 3 and 4 in Boston last year. And it was incredible. It was the FU Draymond game.
Yep.
And it's just, incredible. You're surrounded by people that you watch on TV. I'm doing live shots and Windhorse is to my left. And I'm just like, Wendy, what are you doing? And it's just, it's crazy. Like, you don't really think growing up in this industry that you don't really look to that happening. You just kind of grind one day at a time. And then when you're on the floor with them, granted, Wendy's getting, 3 million more eyeballs than I am, but hell, we're on the same floor. We're
Yeah.
we're
Mhm.
reporting on the same thing. It's really cool.
Most definitely. And I mean, especially that series last year ended great for the Warriors. Just I couldn't imagine that atmosphere in Boston, TD Garden. That had to be, something amazing, something that, you would never really, not expect to experience, but be like, once you're in that moment, you're like, damn, like I'm really here. I'm really on the court of the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, I've found it hard to get into the too much into the NBA regular season. Aside from like, I'll go to the games on a
Yeah.
weekend if I'm off and someone has tickets, or like one time I
Mhm.
got to go into a box at the Warriors game and it was awesome. I mean,
Oh yeah.
box seats. Minor league hockey. That's if it's box seats, sign me up. I'll
Oh yeah.
anywhere. But the regular season, there's just not that much juice behind it because there's so many games, and now with the play-in tournament, it's like you're
Yeah.
you're really just fighting for like a top 5 seed in the West.
Yeah.
But man, when the playoffs start picking up and Shaq and Chuck and all them are live at Chase Center, like it gets real, and it is awesome. TD Garden, that was the most wild atmosphere I think I've ever been a part of. And it's different because at a football game, at a Niners game, at a Tennessee game, at a Kentucky game, whatever I've covered over the years, you're in a press box,
Mm.
and it's noise canceling somewhat, unless it's
Yeah.
open air like Mississippi State. It's pretty much noise canceling. At
Mm.
the in the NBA, press boxes, it's just press
Yeah.
row. It's
Oh
in the
yeah.
arena, so you're hearing everything, and it's crazy.
Man, that's awesome stuff to hear, though. I mean, that's wow. I mean, that's giving me some chills right there too. But let's move on to more talk about the Warriors. So obviously, won the finals this past season. They're trying to make a push here. I think they're the 5 seed right now. Obviously, I'm one of those guys that's like, I watch a little bit of the regular season, but not a whole lot. Wait till the playoffs and you start seeing it ramp up and stuff like that. Because obviously our Bengals are doing pretty well, and then the Niners covering them. The state of the Golden State Warriors as they dealt with this offseason turmoil. Obviously, you had Jordan Poole, Draymond Green, and just, does it look pretty good at this point? Like, being in San Francisco and all, like, how does it look?
Yeah, and I work for the radio station 95.7, the flagship of the Warriors. So I
Mhm.
listen to way more Warriors coverage than I would like to. I listen to opinions every single day,
Oh, I
and I'm
bet.
only on the radio like once or twice a week because I got all the TV stuff. So sometimes 2 weeks will go by where I'm not on the air, and the opinions and the narratives, they shift so quickly. I've been in the mindset, first of all, the Poole and Draymond Green thing. I think that's water under a bridge at this point. Really, since it happened and since Draymond apologized, he's walked on a pretty thin ice. He hasn't gone stomping on the ice, and
Yeah.
he's been fine. He's actually had a real good year too. Just
Mhm.
in general, he's been, he responded the only way he could after that, and there's been no issues with him and Poole. The team hasn't been great. They keep losing on the road. They're terrible on the road. Their
Yeah.
defense has been horrendous until about the last week. Now they're starting to look a little better. Curry's back. Gary Payton II's a possibility. So the state of the Warriors right now, and this is what I always say on the radio shows, and everyone has differing opinions. We have some hosts that say this is past the last dance, like they're done. This is the last time they'll play together and they're not going to get it done. I think anytime they roll a ball out there, they have a chance to win in 7.
Okay.
It's a 7-game series. No one has proved that when they're all healthy for all 7 games that anyone can beat them. Most teams not even taking them to, 7. Last year, not a single team took them to 7 in the playoffs. So that's kind of how I stand. They still have the same roster as last year,
Yep.
most of it. The top 8 guys are still the top 8 guys from last year. If you factor in Peyton, the rotations are eventually going to shrink. Now, I think the NBA as a whole is better. I think they're better teams overall, especially in the East. Milwaukee's better, getting their guy back, Middleton,
Yep.
and then Phoenix is better in the West. And Phoenix was good last year. The Warriors just didn't really get a chance to play him and played a weaker Dallas team, despite I think Phoenix, being better. So that's where I kind of sit in the middle, where I'd say, hey, as a gambling man, if you give me even odds, Warriors of the field, I'm going to take the field just because it seems like the best value. Like there's no 3-4 years ago, the Kevin Durant year, and granted, I got burnt because they lost the Raptors, but before that season, I put in a futures and was like, plus, it was like plus 150. It wasn't even good odds, but it was the Warriors are going to run this back. They're the best team, and they probably would have, but right now, where I stand, I think there are just too many other good teams to say, oh, Warriors over the field. I would take the field for value, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Warriors won it. I'd put it that way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, teams got better at the trade deadline. Phoenix, of course, and all. So, I mean, but obviously, there's a ton of old sayings out there, but you know what it is. You got to see it to believe it. The Warriors have done it before. They've done it countless times, time and time again. They've gotten back there. They've gotten to the finals. They've won it. So, I mean, we'll see what happens with that. But I would agree. I would have to take the field right now because, I mean, some teams have just gotten way better, just even off the trade deadline in general.
And they're gonna have to win on the road at some point.
They're
gonna have to win a couple on the road, and they haven't proved that they can do that yet. And maybe that's just complacency at this point. Look, they're human beings. They've had a ton of success. I'm talking Draymond, Clay, Steph. They've had a ton of success, and they've done this before. They've gone through the grind of a regular season. I think they know how to conserve their energy. I think they know what they're playing for, and they're not playing for February, in March. They're playing for April, May, and June. And with that being said, I think they're just about ready to strike. They are striking, and I would not be shocked if they just rolled through again. And it was like, oh, where was this all year? And the answer is, resting.
Yep.
Resting all year.
Oh, yeah. Resting and having a big buildup. And I think with this next question, I think we kind of already answered it. What must the Warriors improve on to make another title run in the Wild Wild West? Winning on the road. That's, I mean, what is it? Like, we have the third worst road record in the league.
Yeah, it's 20 plus wins at home. It's 7 wins on the road, I believe. And they have that big 5-game winning streak all at home, a perfect homestand. They go on the road to LA without LeBron James, and right away it's back to another L. So we're going to learn a lot about the Warriors over the next 10 games. I don't want to crown them. I don't want to dismiss them. They have a tough stretch coming up, and I think they'll be right around mediocre during that stretch, which is good enough to keep them around where they are, a 5-6 seed, and is good enough to give them a chance in the postseason. But yeah, it's the defense is getting better. They add Andre back to the mix. Iguodala, I don't know what he gives you at this ripe age of 39, but he got, I think, 18 minutes against the Lakers, so they think he can give you something. He didn't give you points, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Missed all his shots. And then you have Gary Payton coming back, who's arguably your best defender. The hope is to get him back, and haven't heard an update on that, so we'll see. But there's time, and if that happens, every game they won last year in the NBA Finals, they held Boston to under 100 points. Yeah. So when the playoffs start, that's there's no more of these 140, 120, 125, 117 type games. Maybe a few, but you're winning games, 105, 101, and their defense is starting to look a little better in that regard. But again, can it travel with them?
Yep. 3-point making, winning on the road, and defense. That's the way the Warriors got to get it done. As of right now, though, what's your NBA Finals prediction as of this moment?
I'm gonna go Warriors. I'm not gonna bet against the champions. They won it 5-6 months ago. Steph Curry's getting healthy. Thompson's had a good year. Draymond's looked good. They're adding all these pieces to the pot. The young guys are starting to play a little better. Jonathan Kuminga, especially. And I don't know. I just still think that it's going to be tough to beat them in 7 games. But I'd say Milwaukee, actually. If I wanted to go with an East team, Milwaukee sounds like a good pick.
Yep. Milwaukee, Golden State. That'd be a really interesting matchup, obviously, with, Giannis against all the small ball the Warriors have to offer. Draymond Green would, try to, piece a role in there to defend Giannis. And that'd be a really interesting series overall. And that actually could go to 7. So who knows with that. And, before we get off here, coming down to the end of the show, I mean, obviously, we love our football, basketball, baseball, and all that. But does it get any better than this time of year in March?
I love it. It's always I was a huge Cincinnati Bearcats fan growing up. And some of my first memories as a sports fan were watching the number one seeded Bearcats lose in the tournament time after time. And had some stints where they didn't make it, then where they were back for a decade, and now they're on like a 4-year hiatus where unless they win the conference tourney, they're probably not going to make it. And there is no better time than March. That bracket for the first week, I was in Vegas last year for my bachelor party, and that was a completely different way to do it. But even just going into work and, sneaking out your phone and watching some games and keeping an eye on the bracket. I mean, whether you gamble, whether you just love watching competitive basketball, whether you love the upset story, there's something for everyone. And I can understand if you don't get into March Madness, you don't have a team, you don't watch college hoops, whatever. But if you actively don't like March Madness, I'm sorry, you're a loser.
Bluntly saying it, but it's facts, though. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, it's like, how can you not like it if you watch it? Like, oh, this product's lame. It's like, what do you mean it's lame? There were 4 buzzer beaters in a span of an hour. Like,
yeah, we had 4 TVs and there were 4 buzzer beaters, and
at the same time, literally at the same damn time.
Oh my goodness, almost like there's a script out there, but there's not. That just it's unbelievable though. But you gotta freaking love this time of year. Man.
Some are better than others. I remember a couple of years ago, it was pretty much 95% chalk, aside from like 1 11 seed beating the 6 seed. The entire tournament was chalk.
Yeah,
I think it was like 2018 or 19. So some years are better than others, but usually you'll get some crazy ones in there. The last couple of years, we've seen a 15 over 2, I think. So.
Man, 15 all the way to the Elite 8. I mean, that's unbelievable stuff. And I mean, with this year, normally there's a couple of really dominant teams each year. There might be a Kentucky of 2014 with Devin Booker as a 6-man going undefeated. There might be a Gonzaga that goes undefeated all the way to the national championship. This year, it's open. It's a pretty open field. So, I mean, it cannot wait to watch that. I mean, it's literally about to happen as we speak. So, but man, I really appreciate you coming on today. This was very fun to talk sports and just talk everything in general, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. If you're ever, looking for any tips to get the first TV job in this industry, or if anyone is, follow me on social media and don't be hesitant to reach out, because I told you this when, you slid into like a TikTok DM or something, said, hey, I'm looking to do this someday. Like, I genuinely enjoy taking time out of my day to help this next generation get into this, because this is my passion. This is what I really love to do. And quite frankly, there are a lot of people out there that'll turn a nose up to you and won't help you. And, you'll send out email after email after email after email and won't even get a response, let alone someone taking time out of their day. So it can be, demoralizing sometime. And I think, it's nice to just have people out there that are willing to share their wisdom and, give you their thoughts.
Most definitely, man. I mean, I can't say how much I appreciate you coming on and everything and, helping me out here and there. So really appreciate that. That's Charlie Walter. I'm Chase Johnson. We'll see you guys